Hi you guys. I've got a new story. I heard it a few days ago. And I think it's just about lodged up here. But I'm only going to tell you half of it, which is going to give you guys the opportunity for having a little bit of fun with the ending. Now, this story was told in the northeast of Scotland by the Romany gypsies, who were amazing storytellers, who are amazing storytellers. And all of their stories have messages, meanings, lessons, morals in. And this one is no exception. And so, without further ado, story! I haven't said that for a while, have I? Let's try it again. Remember, you repeat, story, story. So here we go. Story! Yeah, that's better. Now, a long time ago, there was a little boy called Jack, and he lived in the northeast of Scotland with his mum, and they lived in a little hovel. Rain dripped from the roof and wind blew under the door. Dirt floor under bare foot, one room fire at one end and a pile of hay at the other to sleep in. And this hovel, this little house, was owned by the landowner. Now this landowner was a nasty piece of work. They called him the black-hearted laird. And he liked to keep the people who owned his houses, who lived in his houses, and the people who worked for him, poor and hungry. Because he figured that if they were poor and hungry, they wouldn't cause any trouble. Now, Jack didn't have a dad, because he'd gone to war 1, 2, 3 steps out of the door to never come back no more, like so many have done before. And so Jack had to earn the money for the house, and he'd done this from a very young age. From the age of 5 to 16, which was his age now, he'd worked as a shepherd boy. His mum did her bit. She had the little field that they were allowed to grow crops in to look after, and an old scraggly cow to try to milk each morning. And she would collect the dags, which is the little tiny bits of wool that you find stuck to the blackthorn trees where the sheep rub their bums, and she'd collect them together and she would knit socks. But this only brought in a little bit of money, so Jack had to work really hard. And he worked as a shepherd, and each morning, every single morning, he would go and collect the sheep from the pens, and he would take them up into the high fields. And in the high fields there stood a big old oak tree called Grandfather Oak. And he would sit under that oak tree, sheltering from the wind and the rain and the sun in the summer. And he'd sat there for so long, he'd learnt a new language. He'd learnt to speak birds. You see, in the top of the trees there was always birds. And he'd sat there so long listening to their songs and poetry, he'd began to understand what they were saying. And now, at 16 years old, he could have a conversation back. Now one day, on a beautiful summer's day, Jack was leaning with his back against Grandfather Oak's trunk, when he noticed the birds was reciting poetry that he'd never heard before. And he looked up at them and said, I've never heard that poem before. Where's that one come from? And they said, oh, Jack, don't you know? Today is Midsummer's Day. And this year is the 50th year. Which means tonight, after dark, after the sun sets, the trees are going to dance. Well, Jack was amazed and so excited about the idea of dancing trees. And at the end of the day, when he'd brought the sheep down and penned them, he ran back home and he asked his mum whether she'd heard of this story. And she thought a little bit and then she said, "Aye, Jack, I think I have. My granny told me a story about dancing trees." Now let me think, what did she say? Aye, Midsummer's Night, 50th year, yep, that's absolutely right. But she said something else. Oh yeah, I remember. In the hole where the tree leaves, once it's dancing, you will see all the riches of the world. But you can't take too much, because every single thing you take will be taken back sixfold. Well, Jack was really excited now. And he said to his mum, "I'm going up tonight. I'm going up and I'm going to see what happens." So they sat and they had their tea. A bowl of thin soup it was. And they were just about to finish when there was a knock on the door. And in strode, without your bite or leave, came the black-hearted laird. A big, strong feller he was, with a great big beard and a face that looked like thunder. "I've got friends staying with me," he said, "and we're going out hunting tonight. And you two are going to stay in here, because I think it's very embarrassing when the peasants are out on the land when my friends are around." And with that, he turned on his tail and stormed out the door without even a goodbye.